Good evening and welcome. I'm Laura Hack, Chair of the Board of Trustees. Thank you for joining us for our last cost meeting of the year. Tonight, we're proud to share with you our new education plan, as well as an update on next year's budget. We've dedicated more time for Q&A this evening, and there will be a chance for you to share your thoughts with us and other school councils in breakout rooms as well. Just a few housekeeping notes to make this easier for everyone. Please keep your mics and cameras off for the presentation portion of this meeting. We'll call on you to speak once we get to the Q&A section of the meeting. There's no need to take any detailed notes. The presentation portion of this meeting will be recorded and posted on the CBU website in the next few days. Elders have taught us it's important to acknowledge the land where we gather and the first peoples who traditionally lived here. It shows respect for the people, their contributions, and their ways of being, belonging, doing, and knowing, which are reflected through the stories and songs that have lived on this land for thousands of years. We're making this acknowledgement to demonstrate our commitment to work together as a community in laying the foundation for reconciliation through education. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional territories and oral practices of the Blackfoot Nations, which include the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai. We also acknowledge the Tsuut'ina and Stoney Nakoda First Nations, the Métis Nation, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. I'd like to welcome my fellow trustees. If you can turn on your cameras and give us a wave, Trustee Marilyn Dennis, Trustee Patricia Bolger, Trustee Nancy Close, as well as Trustee Downey, May, and Vukadinovich are unable to be with us this evening and send their regrets. We'd also like to welcome members of the superintendent's team who are attending tonight, and I'll ask our Chief Superintendent, Joe Pittman, to introduce them as we have some new members.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We've got some of the team together, and I apologize, our camera is adjusting to different rooms, so I think we look like a series of sitting heads, but it's wonderful of you to join us on this beautiful June evening. And what I'm first going to just recognize is that the names before you on the screen, unfortunately, Brad Grundy, our CFO, Superintendent of Finance Technology Services, CFO and Corporate Treasurer, is unable to join us, and I would like to welcome Tanya Skanga, who will be speaking to some budget details later. Additionally, Superintendent of Human Resources, Rob Armstrong, is also in attendance at a different CBE meeting this evening, so he is unable to join us today. Sitting in the room with me, I have Mike Nelson, Superintendent of School Improvement, and Jennifer Turner, also Superintendent of School Improvement. And some of you may recognize Mike Nelson in that he's been the interim Superintendent of School Improvement since last July and has held various leadership positions with the CBE over the last 25 years. Together, he and Jennifer make up our team, and Jennifer started her job on Monday with us. So she's joining us. We'll be presenting and be part of some of this, but you'll see other questions if administration responds look a little bit different. She most recently served as director for the Center of Wellbeing in Education at the University of Calgary, and she previously held the position of Chief Superintendent at Fort McMurray Public School District, and has also worked as an Assistant Superintendent, District Principal, Principal Teacher, and a Registered Psychologist in Southeast British Columbia. I'm delighted to have this dynamic team serving the operations across all of our schools in the CBE. And then I also would like to welcome General Counsel Kellyanne Finney. And I would also like to welcome Chief Communications Officer Marla Martin Esposito. And my final welcome is to our Superintendent of Facilities and Environmental Services, Danny Breton. All right, Chair Hack, I'm going to turn it back over to you for a moment.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Chief Superintendent Pittman. Here we have this agenda for this evening. We'll strive to keep everything on time. As we know, spring evenings are a very busy time for everyone here. During the presentation, we're also going to post During the presentation, there won't be a post of links to any of our key documents or web pages, but will be sent out in an email to all of you in the coming days. So here's what it looks like, and I'm going to toss it right back to our Chief Superintendent Pittman, who's going to provide opening remarks about the 2024-2027 education plan.
Thank you, Chair Hack. In a little bit, you're going to receive a more comprehensive overview of our education plan, but I wanted to take the opportunity to provide a few opening remarks. The education plan is the roadmap for CBE for how we help every student to achieve success. Its primary goal is to improve student learning. That is why you see student learning focused goals and all things that support that, and it guides the work of schools and service units. This plan is reviewed and adjusted annually. So while it is a 3-year plan, we continue to utilize, and what you see captured in the gray circle surrounding the graphic, that is the work that we continue to do relative to every action to look to see progress to outcomes and fundamentally achieve those goals. As the board reviews this annually for their approval, it's intended to be future focused as well as responsive to our current needs. And while the plan may look brief, it does not stand on its own. It is supported by 4 foundational frameworks: the 3-year school capital plan, which you'll hear more comment about, our CBE annual budget, and many other plans and reports. For example, when thinking about how is significant enrollment growth captured, it's actually reflected through our capital plan, our modular classroom plan, and ongoing system student accommodation planning. So it's not something that is situated within the education plan, because we have these other structures that fundamentally drive a very focused response in that area. Another example is how we allocate resources financially. And an important example to that is the equity index, which helps guide exactly how we allocate funds to schools based on student need. These are foundational documents that are part of the fabric of CBE and are built into the system. They continue alongside this plan. As an organization, we're very proud of this education plan, primarily because it honors and continues strong work that is taking place even in the face of significant challenge. It is forward-looking, and it's focused on the areas of greatest need to improve student learning fundamentally. I'm going to hand it over right now to Trustee Close to provide some more detail. Thank you.
Thank you. And today we wanted to provide you with an overview of the 3-year education plan for 2024 through to 2027. And as our Chief Superintendent said, the education plan is a roadmap for how we can help every student achieve success. Its primary goal is to improve student learning, and it guides the work of schools and service units. The Board of Trustees sets priorities and expectations through policy and monitors and assesses student and system results. And this plan was approved by trustees at our regular meeting on May 28th and has been submitted to Alberta Education. So every November, we report publicly on the results of the actions taken, basically a report card on the achievement of the previous year's education plan. And this is called the Annual Education Results, or AERR, like the lingo. Next slide, I think. The education plan represents the culmination of an extensive engagement process, including our engagement with you at the February COSC meeting, and also includes a careful analysis of student results. It aligns with the board priorities of student success through achievement, equity, and well-being for both students and staff, and aligns with legislation and expectations set by Alberta Education. It addresses our current and evolving context and builds on the direction, goals, and successes of the previous 3-year education plan, providing stability as we move forward. And all of this is considered at both a school and system level. So in the development of this plan, the CBE engaged with students, staff, families, and the community of Calgary From December 2023 to February 2024, the CBE invited people to share their thoughts and perspectives on the goals, outcomes, and actions related to education planning. The ideas and experiences of more than 9,000 CBE community members were gathered in the following ways. There were 4 online surveys for staff, parents, and the public, and partners and union executives. There was more than 10 in-person sessions with CBE staff, parents, partners, and advisory councils. So that feedback was gathered from the engagement, including what was gathered at the February 22nd cost meeting, and has been posted on the corporate website. And we'll share that link when we mail out this presentation. The materials posted include a 2-page overview of the engagement results and specifically how they influence the education plan. You'll also find perspectives gathered from each of the surveys and in-person sessions referenced on the slide. You can tell we're pretty proud of the engagement process. The feedback gathered highlighted there was strong support for many of the goals, outcomes, and actions in the previous plan. Based on this support and the additional top themes we heard, the CBE is building upon the strong foundation and direction provided through the previous plan with an eye to the future. And now Trustee Bolger will share more about the education plan engagement findings.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Trustee Close. So from all the input gathered through the surveys and sessions across all groups, these are the top 10 themes overall. So first was student and staff well-being is essential to student success. Next, classroom complexity is a top concern for people. Third, anti-racism, diversity, and inclusion strategies are important. And the 4th theme articulated that academic achievement should be a top goal. And number 5, preparing students for the workplace of the future and equipping them with real-world skills. This is something that was particularly important to parents and partners. And on to number 6, people recognize that limited resources and funding are expected to be an ongoing challenge. And though there were varying perspectives on what exactly would be most beneficial in this area, student assessment and reporting was acknowledged to be essential to student success. Number 8, the lack of space available in CBE schools is challenging for the system, for schools, and for families. Another top comment was that collaborative partnerships are important in effectively supporting students and families. And last, but certainly not least, student safety is a primary concern for parents. So overall, it's clear from everything we heard that we must strive for excellence, address the challenge of complexity, promote well-being, and continue to work together. And this is why the 24 to 27 education plan focuses on learning excellence, well-being, and truth and reconciliation, diversity, and inclusion. And as a learning community, we must ensure our education plan addresses the needs of students today and into the future. And now over to Trustee Dennis for more information on how this ed plan responds to the feedback gathered.
Thank you so much, Trustee Bolger, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your beautiful spring evening to be with us. At the beginning of the presentation, Trustee Close mentioned the annual education results report and how it is a report of, basically a report card of CBE student results. It marks progress on the education plan and helps us identify areas for growth. 2 key areas for growth have been identified, and they inform this education plan. The first being the importance of student well-being, engagement, and student voice, and the need for community connection and staff collective well-being. It is in part for these reasons that staff and student well-being has been elevated in the education plan as one of the 3 goals. The education plan also makes strong and explicit connections to expectations from government, namely the 2024 Ministerial Order on Student Learning and the Alberta Education Ministry Business Plan for 2024 to 2027. Expectations are to support students in gaining the skills, knowledge, and competencies they need to live fulfilling lives and make meaningful contributions to their communities and the world. There is continued focus on student achievement, particularly in literacy and mathematics as the foundational building blocks of learning. And you'll also see ongoing support for the implementation of new curriculum. Our goals, outcomes, and actions, as outlined in our well-being goal, are linked to student development of physical fitness, healthy relationships and lifestyles, and also the support of student mental health, providing them with every opportunity to flourish in Alberta's education system and the economy. And now over to Superintendent Nelson, and he will talk a bit more about some of the most notable changes and areas of focus.
Thank you so much, Trustee Dennis, and good evening, everyone. As shared previously, in the development of the 3-year education plan, we've honored what we heard in the engagement process, informed by the core board priorities and the focus of the previous education plan. While we have narrowed our focus from 4 goals to 3 goals in this plan, the focus of the new CBE education plan continues to be on goals, outcomes, and actions directly connected to student learning that were essential pieces of the previous plan. The new education plan is a refinement and refocusing on our work moving into the future. Like the previous education plan, each goal is intended to work in concert with the other, and the overall shape suggests and highlights the importance of well-being, truth and reconciliation, diversity and inclusion as foundational support of learning excellence. While the plan may look different, we actually estimate 70 to 80% of the plan continues the work from the previous plan. The changes are more subtle, with more refinements and refocusing of goals, outcomes, and actions. As an example, the 4 frameworks mentioned earlier remain the cornerstone of the education plan. But instead of pulling out pieces from those frameworks and putting them in the education plan, the plan now refers to the continuation of the implementation of these frameworks throughout the CBE. Aligned with what we heard through the engagement, the number of goals and outcomes has been reduced. This is in alignment with the direction from Alberta Education as well. As you heard earlier in the themes, well-being continues to be a top priority for trustees and the system as a whole. In the new plan, instead of being an outcome and action item within learning excellence goal, it is now standalone with its own goal. The 3 goals are not intended to be looked at in isolation, but in how each goal works together in support of student achievement and success. The frameworks are not removed from learning excellence, but rather highlighted in the goals that they may be most connected to and most directly inform. At the heart of the plan are the board priorities of achievement, equity, and well-being as our centering through line. And while each priority would seem to have a goal directly connected to it, it should be noted that each priority is embedded in and through all 3 of the educational plan goals. As examples, well-being is not only a precondition, but also a concurrent, influential factor in how students enter into a learning task. A student's sense of belonging, self-awareness, and regulation are critical to their academic success as they interact with peers and teachers. Equity is not only key to truth and reconciliation, diversity and inclusion, but is foundational to the work in each goal. Equity of access, equity of education quality, and equity of supports are all key foundations of both learning excellence and well-being. And learning excellence is not simply academic achievement, but also in how we take up learning in ways that are culturally informed, developmentally appropriate, supported for all learners, and responsive to classroom complexity. At this time, I'll pass it on to my new partner, Jennifer Turner.
Thank you. I will briefly share an overview of each of the goals. And so our first goal is learning excellence, strong student achievement for lifelong learning and success. Under this goal, our outcomes are for students to achieve excellence in literacy and in numeracy, that students will improve through fair and equitable assessment practices, and that learning opportunities will prepare students for future learning and success. The second goal area is well-being. The goal here is that students and employees thrive in a culture of well-being. and we have identified 2 outcomes with this goal. The first is that structures and processes improve a sense of belonging and well-being. And the second, that employees are supported in building skills, strategies, and relationships that will contribute to positive well-being. In focusing on well-being for our students and staff, we are being responsive to areas for continued growth identified in the Alberta Education Results Reporting and in CBE's results monitoring, as well as being responsive to the feedback that we received through our community engagement process. The third and final area of focus is truth and reconciliation, diversity and inclusion. Students and employees are to experience a sense of belonging and connection. In this, our outcomes are that students who identify as self-identify as Indigenous experience improved well-being and achievement. Next, that students experience inclusive teaching and learning that reflects and celebrates diverse cultures and identities. And finally, that working and learning environments are promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion. This goal and outcomes are responsive to the dynamic and evolving community that we serve, providing support for diversity and inclusion for all students and staff, and directly aligns with the education plan to our CBE values. And these values are that students come first, that learning is our central purpose, and that public education serves the common good. I'll now turn back to my partner, Superintendent Nelson, to provide a summary.
Thank you. To close, as an organization, we are confident that the 3-year education plan before you today is responsive to the engagement and feedback from our students, staff, families, and communities. It is grounded in student and CBE results. It aligns with both the 2024 Minister Order and Alberta education requirements. It honors and continues the strong work of this organization represented in the previous education plan, and it is forward-thinking and in service of the evolving and changing context of our schools, our community, our city, and our province. I'll now turn it over to Trustee Bolger to share more about the connection between the education plan and school development plans.
Very good. Thank you very much, Superintendents Nelson and Turner. So from a school perspective, you might be wondering how your own school development plan, or SDP, is connected to the education plan. In the same way that the education plan works in concert with the annual education results report, the AERR, school development plans work together with each school's annual school improvement results report. Both reports provide assurance through provincially required measures and local measures which show incremental progress. So we support the work of schools as they communicate and seek feedback from their school communities by intentionally providing support for schools in the interpretation of their data, aligning expectations of school development plans to the key outcomes and actions within the education plan, and setting up feedback opportunities through surveys to engage regularly with councils at school council meetings and with the larger school community through engagement processes that may take place over the course of the year. School councils and each school community continue to be able to understand and situate the work at their school and within the broader system, and are able to provide local feedback informed from both a school and a system view. Over the next 3 years of this plan, we will be providing you further updates. And now let's move on to an update on the 2024 CBE budget.
Thank you so much, trustees, as well as superintendents who just spoke to the education plan. I'm going to pass it over to Trustee Dennis, who's going to speak to our 2024-2025 budget.
Thank you, Chair. So while the education plan sets out what is to be accomplished in terms of student success, the budget shows how the CBE applies the resources entrusted to us in pursuit of the education plan goals. Also important is the management of learning spaces, and we do this through a number of ways. The 3-year school capital plan, which identifies the need for new and modernized learning spaces, Maintenance and renewal plan, which are planned proactive repair and replacement of major building components. The 3-year system student accommodation plan, which supports ongoing student accommodation and planning. And as you can imagine, in an environment of exceptional growth, this is work that never stops for us right now. And also the modular classroom program. This is involved with requests for relocation, removal, or the installation of new modular classrooms at our schools. So when we met with you last in April, we were in the budget development stage of the budget cycle. So now you'll see that we have reached the end of the process timeline, and our balanced budget for the 24-25 school year has been submitted to Alberta Education. The budget was discussed on May 21st and approved on May 28th at our regular public board meeting, and recordings of those meetings are available on the CBE website. Now we'll turn it over to CBE's Director of Corporate Finance, Tanya Skanga, to provide some additional details on the budget.
Thank you, Trustee Dennis, and good evening, everyone. The CBE will receive about $1.4 billion in provincial funding for the next school year, which is $85 million more than we received in prior year. The total budget for the CBE is $1.6 billion. Our HR department has been working tirelessly to hire the additional teachers and school support staff to set us up for success in the next year. In fact, hundreds of newly graduated teachers have already been hired into our system. The lion's share of the entire budget, or more than $1 billion, has now been allocated to the CBE's 251 schools and the more than 147,000 students we expect to welcome in the fall. The CBE continues to experience significant enrollment growth, and our student population is becoming increasingly diverse. We need to balance the impacts of growing and changing enrollment on our infrastructure, educational programming, transportation services, technology requirements, and many more. This budget is balanced. To do so, the CBE needed to draw a modest amount, $2.6 million from our operating reserves. $2.6 million is roughly 1/6% of the total budgeted operating expenditures. Lastly, central fees are not increasing for the new school year. And note, as mentioned previously in the discussions this evening, the fundamental job of the budget is to support the successful delivery of the education plan. The 2024-25 budget focused on addressing our current realities and making the best decisions for our students and staff. We work hard to manage within the resources made available to us, consistent with our values of students come first, learning is our central purpose, and public education serves the common good. Our focus next year will be to provide programming, supports, and services that meet the needs of our students while being responsible stewards of public dollars. As mentioned multiple times in boardroom discussions, we expect there will be an upward pressure on class sizes, although that may not impact every classroom in every school. And now Trustee Close will share more about board advocacy efforts.
Thank you. So let me start here. It's a tough one. CBE is underfunded. Since we last met with you in April, the Board of Trustees has continued to advocate on behalf of CBE students and families, and we believe the government is listening. We have held productive meetings with the Education Minister and are actively looking for ways we can address our space crunch and funding. Despite the $85 million increase, budget 2024-25 does not provide the funding necessary to fund a school district that is growing as rapidly as the CBE is. We're continuing to work collaboratively with the provincial government to address short and long-term needs to ensure our students continue to succeed now and in the future. School boards across the province are having to use reserves to balance their budgets, and we are at an interesting juncture because CBE is not alone in advocating for increased funding. We know that just funding enrollment growth without addressing inflationary pressures results in growing class sizes and impacts the services and supports we offer to families. This year's budget is maintaining services, but we're not able to increase our program services to meet the need that comes with growing enrollment and complexity. Just want to reference for context, the Alberta School Boards Association, or ASBA, advocacy efforts are also focused on the importance of funding more teachers, more space, more stuff, more supplies, more services, because we each recognize that it's not just the costs of increasing enrollment. We also need to keep pace with who our students are as well. So it's not one or the other, it is all, and it's an investment in our future success as a community, as a province. We need to increase funding to acceptable levels so that we can continue to be a leader in education and innovation. There's also an urgent need for short-term space solutions, and we need our capital plan requests fully funded. If that isn't possible in today's budget environment, then we need to revisit how and when we build schools. And there's no question that these are complex times. And with the recent approval of our education plan, we also know that CBE is embracing and addressing our challenges based on their expertise in teaching and learning and understanding the preconditions of student success. So each of us are taking responsibility for our collective responsibility to have the public school system we need. And as a board, we also know that we need to further engage our community to help us ensure that public education is supported in Calgary. So we need to work collaboratively to ensure the needs of students are met and that funding keeps pace with enrollment growth, inflationary pressures, and rising staff costs. Now over to Chair Hack.
Thank you so much, Trustee Close, and thank you to all the superintendents for being here this evening. Very much appreciated. At this time, we're